Were you told you were shy? Do you identify as shy? Do you hate that word now? Do you just wish you could get over it and get on with your life? Welcome to Shining Beyond Shy, empowering you to create a greater life than you ever thought was possible. With your Shining Beyond Shy host, Fiona Cutts. So hi everyone, I'm your host Fiona Cutts for Shining Beyond Shy, and this week I'm super excited. I have Ann Hince here, all the way from the United States. She's originally from the UK, but now she's in the United States. So Ann, you're a spiritual teacher, public speaker, author, and you talk about changing the world from the inside out, which is all very interesting to me. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your story and how you came to these things, spiritual teacher, author?
Yes. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. I call myself a spiritual teacher only in that I'm teaching spiritual concepts that I have learned along the way. And I only call myself an author because I have written a book about my story. So, my story started from childhood. I had a lot of trauma in childhood. I know a lot of us do. I don't know that mine was any more than anyone else's. I had two alcoholic parents, and so life was hell during that period of time. And when I was 19, I walked into the bathroom one morning when I woke up and found my mother dead on the bathroom floor. So that was a big trauma at the time. And we didn't talk about emotions or feelings in my family. My mother did have cancer, and that's what she died of in the end. But we only talked about it one day. The day we were told she had cancer, that was it. We never talked about it again. So after she died, I didn't know what to do. And I just suppressed all these feelings and emotions. And I just went on with life because I didn't know what else to do. So it wasn't until I was in my late 30s and I was a stay-at-home mother with two young boys. And I had this kind of altercation. It was like a business altercation with two other mothers at school. I did something that they didn't like. And my mind just span out of control. It just replayed the event over and over, and I couldn't sleep for days. And I realized that this was not normal. Other people don't do this. And that was the first realization to me that something was wrong and I had to do something about it.
Yeah, that's so interesting hearing you speak, obviously also from a British family, and that's so British. Oh, we don't talk about this. Oh, emotions. Also, it's like everything was like beneath the surface in my family. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, actually, do you know what I discovered? And it's like, this shows how deep it goes. I even feel a bit weird about saying this on the podcast, but I've started, so I'll finish. It's like my granddad was actually an alcoholic, and I only found out like years after he died. And my mum, it was my mum's dad. My mum wouldn't talk about it. Suddenly my dad told me, and I was like, oh, wow, really? And I had no idea. I knew how my granddad behaved, but had no idea that anything like that was going on. So that is really very much welcome to, maybe it's a little bit different now, a little bit, but welcome to England in those days.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Even I never used that word alcoholic until I had left England and then realized, put words to my experience. But totally obvious. My mother would drink a bottle of sherry every day. And yet, nothing was ever discussed. So anyway, I was in my late 30s, excuse me, and I went to a doctor's appointment. I don't remember what for, but my doctor recognized that I was really more stressed than I should be. I was a stay-at-home mother with two young boys. So that can be stressful for sure. But he recognized I was more stressed, and it was an 8. And then he asked me why. And I knew straight away, because the tears from finding my mother 2 decades earlier by now, the tears were still just under the surface because I hadn't dealt with them. So he used this technique with me. It's a little weird. It's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. And it's also called tapping, because we're tapping on the body. He used this technique with me for about 15 minutes, and I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story in my mind without the tears there anymore, like I was reading from a book. And it was such a huge shift for me that I knew there was something to this. So, I used to be a software engineer, so I have kind of a bit of an engineering mind, and I wanted to know that it just wasn't a fluke and that there was really something to this. So in the next day or two, I don't remember the exact timing, but we had a 17-year-old cat that we were told needed daily saline shots. So I hate needles, always have hated needles. So the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was just shaking almost uncontrollably. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day. It was too stressful to do that. So I thought, well, this is a good test case. So I tapped using this technique. I tapped on my hand, about my hand shaking, about my fear of hurting my cat, and about my memories of injections. So all different aspects of what I was dealing with there. And the next day, the needle just slid right in, and my hand did not shake at all. It was totally calm. So I realized at that point that this was a really deceptively powerful technique, and I started using it every day. I started tapping when I found myself in with something that happened either during the day or at night. In the evening, I would recall what had happened and tap about it. And I found my mind becoming quiet, and it was so nice.
Yes. And it's interesting what you said earlier about, obviously that's very extreme trauma at 19 to walk in and find your mum has died. That's extreme. But you said that a lot of people don't respond in the way that you were 2 decades later. So for a lot of us, we have some traumatic events in our childhood. And so I think what you're saying is that unless we take some action to release them, or unless we feel them fully at the time, they will still be there decades later. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. That doctor's appointment, that was the first time I really understood that we keep that emotional trauma stored in our physical bodies. It's still there. And I do believe that to this day that every tear that we never shed in childhood, it's still there inside of us and will come out if we go back and look at those events, those memories, and let the emotions go. So yes, it's stored as dis-ease in the body. Absolutely. Yes. I have no question in my mind at this point.
And I'm asking you like that for our listeners. I also have no doubt about that, having had my own journey with chronic fatigue syndrome. It was like there was a certain point that my body just couldn't cope with all the stuff that I just hadn't expressed. And it takes a lot of energy to not express. So for me, it showed up as fatigue. For other people, it can be, like you say, stress or emotional crying or all kinds of things, and including I was going to say chronic fatigue is a serious illness, but because it normally doesn't kill you, it's not really, I think a lot of people don't see it as a serious illness, but it can show up as cancer or all of that.
Yes, there's so much energy. You're right, it does take a huge amount of energy to hold that tension inside of us. It really does. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I started using this technique every day and found my mind becoming quiet. And so I wanted more. I knew it was working and I wanted more. So what I did is I wrote down every emotional memory I could remember from my childhood, every event, everything that I could think of at that time. And I worked through one each night. I tapped through one each night, probably for an hour to an hour and a half each night, until each event just became like a story to me. It had no emotion left in it. And my mind just became more quiet. And at some point, I recognized that it felt like I was living in a different reality because my mind was so quiet. And I realized the words, the words I had been using in my mind, the ones that I would criticize myself with and judge other people, had been my dad's words that I had programmed into myself in childhood. And I just replayed them over and over again. but I couldn't see that until they were gone. Then I could look back, right? So while I was living in it, and while my mind was so busy, I didn't know that I was replaying those words. I knew the words were there, but I didn't know they were his, and I didn't know they could go. So actually to have my mind free of those words was really eye-opening.
Yes.
So then I wanted more again. I'd actually been in a group at the time, and we were studying A Course in Miracles. And at the beginning of the group, I was just starting this tapping journey. So I didn't really know how I felt. I didn't know what my emotions were because I'd suppressed them for so long. And so the guy in this group would say every week, it's not about meditation. You don't have to meditate, which I liked him saying because I didn't want to do that. All you have to do is feel your feelings. But I didn't know what he meant by that. But as the weeks went by and I did more and more of this tapping, I became aware more of my feelings. And so underneath every emotion, right, we use the word fear or anger or sadness, but underneath each one of those is a set of physical sensations. So when we're feeling afraid, we're probably holding tension somewhere. I can feel it in my stomach, but people feel it in their jaw, or their neck, or their shoulders. That set of physical sensations is a deeper level of awareness once you become aware of them. And then at that point, I could tap on those, right? With tapping, you talk the words out, right? So I would say, I'm feeling this fear in my stomach, and I could tap using those words. But I wanted just to feel my feelings, which is what this guy talked about. If that's all it's about, I want to do that. So I had to work out how to do that, right? How do you actually feel those physical sensations? And I realized, all throughout this work, it's the emotions are just stuck energy. So these physical sensations are just stuck energy. And to release, they just want to be felt. So I would put my awareness on the physical sensations. But when I did that, they kind of wanted to move around because I was so good at suppressing them. So I had to work out how to do that. And it sounds so silly just to say, well, surely you can just feel your feelings. Well, it's like, no, it's not as easy as it sounds. So I would find myself, I would be doing the dishes, and I would think a thought that had emotion behind it. And I would stop what I was doing. And I realized I actually had to become a statue. So I would hold my breath. I wouldn't take a deep breath. I would feel where those sensations were and stop breathing right there. And then I could put my focused awareness on these physical sensations and hold it there. So sometimes I'd have to talk to it. It's like, okay, I can feel this tension right there in my stomach. I can feel you there. I know you just want to be felt. I'm going to feel you now. I don't want to change you. I just want to feel you. And then I would find myself having to take a deep breath. And as I did that, there would be a release. The release might come first, and then I'd have to take the deep breath, or I would take the deep breath and there would be a release. But there was a release of tension. And then I would bring the thought back to mind again and feel the tension again. Has it moved? Has it shifted somewhere, which it might have done, or it might have diminished somewhat. But then I would do it again. And I would keep doing it again and again with the same thought until that tension had gone. And I felt, we talk about holding the weight of the world on our shoulders, right? So I felt this weight lifting from doing all this work. And I felt myself becoming lighter and happier, more joyous. So I kept going. I wanted to do more. So instead of doing the tapping at night, I would do this work. I would lay on the sofa. At this point, I'd done a lot of my history, my traumatic history. So I worked on more collective things like 9/11. And I was in the Loma Prieta earthquake here in California. So I would bring those to mind, feel all the emotions about them, around them, let it go, do it again, again and again and again, until those thoughts no longer had emotions behind them. And at some point during this part, I actually found that I could keep my awareness inside my body, which is a deeper level of awareness than the physical sensations. I was actually inside my body. And the way I kind of explain this is, if you have a toothache or a stomach ache, you can normally pinpoint in your mind where that's coming from. But once it's gone, you can't get your awareness back inside. But I found I could keep my awareness inside and keep my awareness on tension. I could find tension on the inside of me with my mind, with my focused awareness. So I would do the same thing. I would find the next place of tension, hold my attention on it, not want to change it in any way, just focus on it, and it would let go. And then I'd do it again and again, just like I was doing with the physical sensations and just like I was doing with the tapping, but now on a deeper level. So then I would just do that again and again, and found deeper tension to release. And at some point I was actually able to put my awareness in my head. And once I was in there, I would keep doing it. And I got to the point that I could actually hear and feel something release on the inside, which was a little scary to begin with because I didn't know what I was doing. But I realized it's just the next part on the process of the process. So I would just do it again and again. And what I realized is I'm releasing tension stored in the connective tissue of the body. And then I keep doing this again and again. And at this point, I got some x-rays that I had 8 years ago, and then again this last year. And you can see that this deep relaxation has actually shifted my skull bones. It's moved my jaw more into the center. It's aligned my eye sockets, it's straightened my neck. And as a 55-year-old, I've grown 1/2 inch. So I know this is a powerful way of releasing dis-ease from inside the body.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so have you pretty much developed this yourself just from experimenting, or were you, so after the EFT, were you guided to this, or did you kind of get there yourself?
Well, yeah, I kind of got there myself with this guy saying it's about feeling your feelings. So I had to work out how to do that. And yes, at each step, I just wanted to release more tension, because it feels really good to release really old stored tension, right? It's going to feel really good. So there was really nothing else I wanted to do. So I just would find the next area of tension, focus on it, release it, and just, I realized that concept of the expansion of awareness was just, it was just so amazing that I just wanted more and more.
No wonder you're speaking to each other. I have that. Yes, I'll have more. As soon as I find something good, I'm like, more of that, please. Okay, yes. What else do I want to ask you? So when you speak, it reminds me of, so I used to be Buddhist, and I remember there was a book, I think it was by Reginald Ray. I don't know why I remember this, but it was exactly about this, being able to feel down into your body, and just by your very presence, stuff can, well, stuff, that's so eloquent, the emotions, the thoughts from the past can release. And actually what causes it to be there in the first place is our lack of presence, our inability to be present when it first occurs.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. I would actually like to read that book because I don't know anyone else who has talked about going inside the body and feeling inside there. And it's all about, like you just said, it's all about recognizing our truth right in the moment. And yes, I mean, I guess I spent years not in the present, right? I was in the past or the future. And this work just allowed me to be very, very present, and then to recognize our truth. We hide it under so many layers. So with the tapping, we find our truth right now. So to begin with, the truth might have been my dad shouted at me, right? That might be all I know about that. But then, so then I would tap on that using EFT. I tap on my dad shouted at me. And as that resistance or that energy around those words releases, then it kind of opens up the subconscious mind. So you'll be aware of a little bit more. So I might then become aware that I was actually afraid when my dad shouted at me. And that's a slightly deeper level of awareness. And then I could tap on that. And I might recognize when or what I had done when he shouted at me. And so just we kind of open up one more layer at a time. And then our truth becomes more specific, right? We're more able to pinpoint our actual truth. And once we do, we're kind of focusing deeper and deeper into our body. We're actually focusing on the dis-ease in our body and letting it go from the outer layers to the inner layers.
Yeah, I love the way you talk about it. And I'm just going to say something to kind of bring it back for shy people. I mean, I think people listening to this will be interested anyway. But it's interesting that you give that example of your dad shouting, because that's exactly what, well, one of the main things that caused me to be shy was my dad's behavior and me adopting that, well, I better be quiet, I'd better keep out of sight. And discovering, like you say, in different ways. Actually, for me, it was also through EFT years ago, but in different ways since then, discovering what was going on for me and being able to release it. And I think for a lot of people who suffer from shyness, there are these events in childhood that can actually create the shyness. And I love the way that you talk about going down through the layers. And as you go down through the layers, you actually come to you and who you are in terms of, well, we talked about it in terms of illness. So you're not ill. It's like I wasn't fatigued. I'd somewhere created the fatigue. And my view is the same with shyness. We're not actually shy. We somehow create the shyness as a coping mechanism, and it can be uncreated.
Absolutely, yes. My dad used to tease me about my voice. And he was, I guess the term is narcissist. It's not something I used at the time, but he was always right. Whatever opinion I had about anything, he was always right. So I made that decision. I made the decision not to talk and not to give my opinion because it didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter. So in making that decision, I actually changed the fascia, the connective tissue in my face, right? When you make the decision not to talk, you're actually holding tension in the face, and that stores tension in the connective tissue. And it actually makes it harder to talk. It makes it physically harder to talk, that I've realized at this point. So yes, that shyness is created by decisions we make in childhood. I was always told just to go away, then to be quiet and go away. And so I was, and it took a long time to reverse that through this work. One of the most interesting things to me in having these x-rays, I have the x-rays from the front, which are the most recent one, but a few months prior to that, I had ones from the side. And in my YouTube channel, if anyone wants to look there, I have a video that talks through these. But the x-ray from last year from the side, if you look at it compared to the one from 8 years ago, the one from last year is a more confident person. You can see that the stance is a more confident person because I've released this tension holding me in the stance that makes me look not confident, right? Afraid, shy. So it's letting go of all those memories and the decisions I made, the beliefs I put inside of me, and letting those emotions go releases the body so that it actually will feel more confident.
Yes. Yeah, it's really interesting. So many similarities. Like my dad, some very similar things and some similar responses from me. And you know, when I was a child, I had loads of throat infections, loads of coughs. I actually had my tonsils taken out. And yeah, it's really interesting what you say about it actually becomes harder to speak when we habitually, well, either don't speak or don't say what we want to say. It actually becomes harder to speak. And actually, you know, one thing I noticed during extreme COVID times was I had a lot of isolation, and it's like I found there were some days where I scarcely spoke to anyone. I mean, I was speaking to people online a little bit, but I was really quite isolated, and it actually became harder to speak and to voice to the extent that I wasn't. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting the way I know now because I'm sensing inside. I know I'm sensing through the connective tissue and the fascia, even the words, right? Fascia, facial expressions, face, right? Those words are all connected, and it's those facial expressions. When we don't say our truth, in the moment, we're actually holding something back. We're actually holding our face in a different expression than we would if we just let it flow. Right. So even with tapping, I recommend people maybe, I call it air tapping. So we pretend someone is outside of us, like sitting on our lap or standing in front of us, and we tap on them and we tell them our exact truth, right? The words that we would have said to them if we felt comfortable saying our truth, to actually get it out of the body. Right? And it could be someone that you're interacting with or having a hard time with now, or it could be someone from your past. It could be someone who's passed already. And there's something that you want to say to them. I encourage people to tap on them and say it out loud. So then we're getting it out of the body. It's no longer stuck inside of us.
Yes, because it's funny. Something happened for me this morning. I was talking to someone who I work with, and I knew that she was upset with me. And I just realized she's going to listen to all of this. So hello. Now I'll finish. And we just realized that she felt that I wasn't appreciating her. And actually, it was people in her past who hadn't appreciated her. But because that's there in our energy field or in our body, however you want to express it, it's like we think it's there with other people.
Yes, we do. And one of the big things I'm trying to share with people to have them understand is whatever happens outside of us, we have control over our feelings, right? So even if I was watching two people interacting in a negative way, if I have feelings around that, I can change that, right? I can tap on it, I can feel those feelings, I can let it go, so that we can become imperturbable, right? That, to me, that's the goal. I can watch anything happen around me and still have that peace inside of me. So one of the things that I used along the way is I got a real understanding of the law of attraction. Now, I know a lot of people use law of attraction in terms of manifesting. I was not doing it that way. My understanding came in that I know it's happening every second of every day, right? It's a universal law. So every second of every day, we are putting out a signal, and the whole of me is that signal. It's all my past that's stored inside of me. It's my gender, my height, my size, my hair, my clothes, everything about me is part of that signal, and it's attracting back into my future every second of every day. So I would ask myself during the day, so how am I feeling right now? And do I want to feel this way again in the future? Because it's that feeling complex that we're attracting back. So most of the time when I ask myself that, my answer was no, I don't want to feel this way again. So I would do something about it right then, because I wanted to change my signal right then. So, the simplest way to do that is just to take a deep breath. But a deeper way of doing it is actually tapping or feeling the feelings, because then you're changing that base signal inside of you. You're changing that tension held in the connective tissue. And that then changes our future. Because what I realized, and it's easier to see the more and more you do this, the more your awareness expands, you can actually see how we replay everything. And we're replaying those feelings. We got programmed in childhood to feel a particular way, to experience a particular thing, to react a particular way. And we just do the same thing over and over again. But if we catch that in the moment, if we catch a reaction to possibly a button, right? Someone pushes one of our buttons and we react. If we just keep going with that reaction, we're putting that signal out again, and it's going to come back to us. But if we catch that reaction as it's happening and we tap, we let it go, then our signal has changed. Next time we'll attract something and we'll react slightly differently. If we catch it then, do the same thing, then the time after that, it will shift. Eventually, it will no longer be a button. And people can't push our buttons. And that's a great place to be.
It certainly is. I love this. And yeah, so much I love about it. But I guess one of the main things is it's so empowering, because I think when I look at my own story with shyness and chronic fatigue and playing small, it's so easy to think that you're a victim. It's you know, when stuff doesn't go the way you want it to, so you become fatigued, stuff doesn't go the way you want it to. Oh, I'm stuck in this shyness. And, you know, another message I got from my family was, people like us don't do this kind of thing. And so having that in my head the whole time, and they're just realizing, no, none of that is true. Actually, we can empower ourselves to create our lives, to have what we would like to have in our lives. And one of the things I'm really actually grateful for with COVID, Corona time, is that somehow it's made that clearer to me that actually we choose our reality, we invent ourselves, we can create ourselves. And I love the way that you've talked about that.
Thanks. Well, see, if I was in that situation, everything I've done is about accepting whatever it is we're thinking or feeling, because that acceptance allows it to pass through. So if I was tapping on what you had just said, I would tap on, people like us don't do things like that, right? Yeah. I'll tap on that phrase, because that phrase is stored in us, in the connective tissue, right? Or in you, in your connective tissue. And if you tapped on it and just kind of accepted it, okay, people like us don't do things like that. Once we fully accept it, it has no power over us anymore. Because I actually remember once, and I wouldn't recommend anyone does this until they've done some of the outer work, but I got to the place where I realized I hated myself, and I tapped on that for probably 2 or 3 hours. I don't remember, for over a period of time. I tapped on, I hate myself. And once I could fully get to the place that I totally accepted that, it had no power anymore. It was gone. So I can say I hate myself. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just words. And we have so many words these days that have, right, emotions and memories behind even the word COVID, right? We all have memories and emotions around that word now. So even if we all just tapped for 10 minutes on the word COVID, that would make a difference to our future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we can always take responsibility for everything that goes on. We don't, you're right, we don't think we have any control, but if we tapped on all these issues that we're divided about at the moment, right, we all have feelings about one side or the other. And if we let those emotions go, I believe we can all come together in peace, right? If nothing charged us anymore, if nothing had an emotional charge in us, it wouldn't matter anymore, and we wouldn't have to attract the same events back to us.
Yes, yes. I'm with you on that. I mean, the work that I do, Access Consciousness, we have different language to talk about this, and it's in other of my podcast episodes if you're interested, but I love the way you talk about it. Absolutely, it's the fight and the resistance to the stuff that's going on. In this case, the COVID crazy, all the regulations, all the stuff that comes with COVID. And if we can get to the point where we actually don't have a point of view about it, it's, well, first of all, like you say, it's freeing for us, the peace for us inside. And I mean, I know this because I've done every kind of fighting against some of the COVID regulations. It's like I really struggled at the beginning, being a freedom-loving kind of girl. And the peace that I have now, that there's way more acceptance or allowance of what's going on in the world, it's just incredible. And then it's not just about me or you and us having peace. Actually, when we choose something, it's an invitation to other people. So our choices change what's going on the planet. And I don't know if you have a different way of saying that, because you touched on that as well, that what we're doing is kind of greater than just us. Do you have well, can you say something about that?
Sure. Well, if we're in peace, right, if we're in peace with our own decision, that's the signal that we're emitting, and we're going to attract peace back to our future, right? So if everyone is allowed to make their own decision, then everyone will be at peace, and we will all attract peace back to us. So yes, it's important. It's an important understanding. I mean, I look at it through energy, right? If you're trying to push someone to do something that they don't want to do, you're going, every force has an equal and opposite, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're pushing against someone, there's going to be pushback, and neither person is at peace, right? You're going to attract back pushing against something, right? So if you can let that go and allow people to do what's right for them, they are at peace, and we're attracting peace. And I would rather live in a peaceful world.
Me too, particularly after the last 2 years.
Yes.
Because again, I don't know what you get about this, but it's like, my sense is that also when we look at the world, it appears as though certain places are more crazy, more conflict, more rules than ever. At the same time, there's so many situations where different things are showing up, where courageous people are standing up and saying what they believe, where stuff is just changing in the other direction.
It is, yeah. And when we look at those things, so I didn't watch the news for a long time, right? As I started this journey, I didn't need any more added. So I didn't watch the news for a long time. But now I've cleared out enough on the inside. I want to know what triggers me, because if I find something that triggers me, I know I can work on it, and my awareness will increase and my tension will decrease. So when I see something on the news about a country or someone somewhere, something bad is happening, and I notice that, right? I feel something about that. That's my work then, is to work on that. It's not outside of me, right? What I can work with is what's inside of me. So am I feeling sad for those people? Am I feeling scared for those people? What am I feeling on the inside? And I can work to release those. And I know that that work inside of me is going to affect what's happening outside of me.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and it's so empowering.
Yeah, we can do it. I mean, you know, if we can change our bone structure, if we can grow, right? That's part of the reason I'm sharing this story. It's like we have much more power inside of us, an ability to make changes than we believe. I didn't know this was possible 10 years ago, and now I do. And so I feel like if we could all do this, who knows what we could do?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's so inspiring. So is there anything else you'd like to, any other golden nuggets you'd like to share before we finish? Anything else?
Actually, I'd love to share the story from before COVID, when I had this group. And it was a tapping group. We'd do EFT. But at the beginning of the group, we'd all sit in a semicircle. We'd close our eyes, and I would play a series of chimes, just chakra chimes. Then we would open our eyes, and we would share our experience. Now, there were some people, and now I know this is the least level of awareness. This is where I used to be. Some people who could only hear the sounds, excuse me, with their ears. And then there are some other people who would hear the sounds with their ears, but they would also feel some of the sound vibrations in their body. And then the other end of the spectrum, and this is where I am now, who could feel the sounds throughout their bodies. The resistance was not there. The sounds would pass through their bodies. So sharing that experience with each other, now the people who can only hear with their ears, they now know there's this depth of experience in life that they have not yet attained, but they know it's available to them, and they can seek it out. And on the other end of the spectrum are people, and empaths, I think, start further along this spectrum. But there are people who feel at a much deeper level, but now they know there are people out there who don't, who only hear the words. And I think we see that in society now, right? There's a lot of people who only hear the words and they don't feel anything beyond that. But there were other people who know there's more to it, right? And look into it and understand at a deeper level. So this whole process expands that awareness. It moves from one side right to the other, and it gives a whole depth to life that I didn't know about before, right? But now I do, and hopefully you listening do too. And it makes life much more satisfying it actually increases all the senses as well, right? My sense of taste is so much better than it used to be. And my feeling capability, right? I have a depth of awareness on the inside, and I see that in other people. I can see where they're holding tension. I can see where they're not breathing deeply anymore. And that's because I've developed it in myself first, so we can all do that.
I love it. Thank you so much. And yes, in the end, it's interesting because that is, I think, a kind of, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Why do we start to do this work? And so in terms of people on this podcast, we collectively have a problem. Oh, we're shy. But this is what I see when people release the shyness, and the way that you describe is kind of similar to some of the work that I do, different techniques. And it's like, as we release these things, whether it's shyness, fatigue, cancer, actually what occurs is we start to enjoy life. We didn't. It's like I certainly hadn't. I mean, at the time that I started this path, I mean, it was really the chronic fatigue syndrome that started me, and I discovered it was intimately connected with shyness. But I had no idea that I was just looking to survive, you know, to not actually find out that I didn't wake up one morning because I was so tired. It's like I wasn't looking to enjoy my life. I was looking to survive. And yet when we do this work, and I mean, I love the way that you've talked about everything that you have done and continue to do, because I guess this is the other thing with these techniques, that they don't stop. It's not like suddenly, oh, I'm totally aware and I stop. It's like, I think that's what's exciting to people like us, that we can continue actually this journey, and it continues to get better and better. And yeah, I had no idea that this was where I was headed, and how, you know, as we get older, actually everything can become more enjoyable.
It can. We're releasing that burden that we've been carrying all those years. Yeah. I mean, I know I'll go to the cinema these days. I actually haven't been since COVID, but I used to go to the cinema, and I would find it so easy to laugh, right? I would be the only one laughing and no one around me was laughing, just because it's so easy, right? There's nothing holding me back. There's no fear that oh, should I be laughing if no one else is laughing? Those kind of fears aren't there anymore. So yeah, it definitely lightens. And that's part, I believe, of the enlightenment process. It is a process, right? We're releasing that burden that we've been carrying, so we actually feel lighter. And also on the inside now, because I can sense light and dark on the inside, I know that as we release this tension, what's underneath is light. So the more release, the more light we are on the inside. So that's part of the enlightenment process.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so much. It's like, it's funny when you talk about laughter, because that is also one of the things that's changed for me. And I'm noticing I'm sitting like miles away from you in Croatia, laughing at what you're saying. And yeah, how amazing. So can you tell us, and we'll also put it in the show notes, can you tell us where people, our listeners, can find you?
Sure. I have my book. It's called A Pathway to Insight, and it goes through these different steps that I went through in a lot more detail. That's available from Amazon, or you can possibly ask your local bookstore to order it. I also have a website, annhince.com. I have a YouTube channel that has some videos of this in more detail, kind of, and some examples, an example EFT video, an example feeling your feelings video. And I have a public Facebook page that I love sharing things and interacting on.
Okay, that's brilliant. So we'll put links to all of that in the show notes. And so I really, really, really thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I think it's stuff that will be really useful to, well, to any shy person or anyone else who's listening. It's like, it's really relevant. I really thank you.
Thank you for having me, Fiona. It's been great.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm so grateful for you. It would be great if you could subscribe, great if you could even review wherever you're listening. And if you'd like some quick, simple tips to overcome shyness wherever you are, please go to my website, fionacutts.com, where you can download my free product, 5 Steps to Overcoming Shyness Wherever You Are. Thank you again, and see you next time.